When you're in a sales role, you really focus on closing the sale. That's really the main thing. These guys focus on questions about coverage, about plans. I need ID cards. So there's so many different scenarios. We want to make sure that they're well-rounded so that they can help any client with any request they have. And sales can continue to do what they do best, which is welcoming those brand new prospects into EIP.
We are starting off today with an interview I've been excited about because I think it's a piece of the business that a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention to, even though it's one of the most important things that we do as an insurance agency, which is support. Today I've got Monica on, and she is the support director here at Elite Insurance Partners. Has been with us for a good bit of time and leads a team that's surprisingly large for what most agencies would expect. She's got 15 people that she leads, and they are pretty unique in this space. And we're going to go over some of those things today and why they're unique. You know, getting sales from the beginning is extremely important, but keeping those policies on the books are also very important when it comes to growing an agency. So Monica, happy to have you on here today. I really want to just kind of jump into it and kind of get to some of the meat and bones. And one of those things is EIP's got a pretty substantial book of business. We've been in business for over 10 years now. In that time, we've generated millions of leads, sold hundreds of thousands of policies. That book has swollen to a large size here. And it takes a lot of customer support to do that. But with the 15 people that you have on your team, what's unique about your team is the fact that they're fully licensed. So what does that kind of give them the opportunity to do as a customer support agent, as opposed to just having somebody that's more of like a secretary or personal assistant or an executive assistant? I hear so many people hiring people overseas and things along those lines. What are some of the things that your team has the ability to do that maybe those other people can't do?
Well, I would say that they work on so many different types of scenarios and so many things that they can do for the client. They help with explaining coverage options. They compare plans. They really help navigate the client through the complexity of Medicare based on the client's health and also their budget.
You would think that the sales agent who sold them the policy originally has kind of already done that. But what it sounds like is you find even after somebody who's gone through an entire hour-plus long presentation that's compliant, has to be, all these conversations are recorded and we've got to hit our different talking points on the sales side, there's still questions that the clients have.
Absolutely.
I think we've got a couple different categories of clients. We've got our Medicare Advantage clients. We've got our Medicare Supplement clients. And now actually, as we're growing out our life team, we're going to start having our more and more of our life insurance clients. So let's just kind of start on the Medicare Supplement side of things, which is where we cut our teeth. What are some of the questions, problems, things that your team deals with kind of on a regular basis?
You said it best earlier when you said, the client's on the phone typically an hour, sometimes more. Our sales department does, and the sales agents, they do a great job giving the client all the information that they need. But it's a whole hour, and it's really hard for a client to just remember every piece of information, right? So, and that's okay. And that's why EIP has this support department, which is where we come in and we ensure that if the client still has questions about their coverage, in the scenario you just said, we'll start off with Medicare Supplement. In the Medicare Supplement, there could be some gaps, and not just in that one, but I'll start off with that. If they still have questions about their coverage, if they still have questions about their plan, and this is in general with all of the plans that you said, they fill in those gaps. They ensure that the client understands how their plan works, including the premium. Sometimes it's as easy as, hey, I know we talked about it. He said it a couple of times, but when is my premium due? When is my first premium due? So we definitely jump in and we tackle those questions on. And then we ensure that if there is any type of gap in their coverage, and like I said, the sales department, they do a great job with ensuring that they give all this information to the client, but it's just so much information. So sometimes when you hear it a second time, or you have that second voice kind of, just reminding you that, hey, you might have this gap in coverage, just bringing it up so it really helps the client kind of like, okay, well, now I got the big thing out of the way. Now I took care of my main concern, which was getting the Medicare supplement. What was that you discussed about dental? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So their ears they almost have that aha moment.
Dental's a big piece. What other ancillary products do the agents tend to find matches up well with a Medicare supplement client? If somebody were maybe already purchased like a high deductible plan G, do they go into maybe a hospital indemnity as an option, or how does that typically work?
The way it typically works for us is we do a lot of fact-finding questions, right? It's part of our process. We want to make sure that we are catering to the client based on their health and the budget, right, and their needs. In a Medicare supplement, we typically focus a little bit more on a dental, vision, hearing product. With the client versus a Medicare Advantage client, we might focus on something else like a hospital indemnity product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It is one of those things where, because Medicare supplements do fill in so many of the gaps, except in the case of maybe your high deductible plans, there's less urgent need. And I think what you're saying is what we do is it's more of a fact finder as opposed to we're going to go out and push a product. I think I've heard Jagger say this a lot of times, the last thing we'd ever want to do is lose our core policy because we're pushing too hard on any of the other policies. And is that the approach on the customer support side? It's not a hard sales pitch.
That's correct. I like to say that we practice the art of being a hybrid role. People who've spoken to me, they've heard me say it. It's really a hybrid position. While I may be over the support department, I really focus on two things. One of them is that the agent is doing what we do first, which is taking care of the client, taking care of their needs, the client's request, questions, whatever it may be. First thing is first, and that's taking care of the client. And then we really move on into that, what I say it's a hybrid role, right? Which is, I don't look at it as it's a sales position. I look at it more as an educator, right? So because we focus so much on customer care, customer support, helping the client, we almost feel like it would be a disservice if we didn't review the client's account and say, you know what, there could be a gap in this coverage. Let me ask those fact-finding questions. What is it that the client is missing? How can I help the client ensure that they're covered if they need to? So while earlier I talked about dental, vision, and hearing, and then I also said, hospital indemnity, if it's like an MA client, there's other products such as a CHAS product, the cancer, heart attack, and stroke, an accident product. So it really is based on the fact-finding questions that we have. How can we at EIP ensure that we're helping the client get the best value for their buck, ensure that they're covered where there is gaps?
And really the only way that that's a possibility is because they're licensed agents. They are full-fledged insurance agents. They licensed in all the different states that we represent, all 50 states. And they actually have the ability to sell those products, but they also have the knowledge on how those products work, where as opposed to an executive assistant or maybe an overseas BPO that is answering your questions, they're going to save you time as an individual agent or as an agency on some of those small things so your team can focus on getting those new sales. But they're just a cost sink. They're saving you time, but they're costing you money. There's no real revenue coming in on that side, whereas our team actually does have revenue coming in because of the fact that they can sell those products and do sell those products. So I want to get into that. The average customer service rep, how many products, how many policies would they typically sell on average over the course of a month?
Over a course of a month, and we're talking about ancillary pretty much products?
Well, actually, no. I mean, I want to say just generally speaking, because if they're selling a Medicare Advantage policy or a Medicare supplement policy, that's because they're filling the need of one of our clients has already called in and maybe they've got a price increase and they're worried about that. And so our agents can sell a new Medicare supplement policy, review, see if there's something out there that's going to be cheaper for them. I mean, I think that's just as valuable.
Yep, that's correct. So, which is why I kind of wanted just to clarify, because they also work on, because we do a lot of fact finding, and there might be an opportunity for us to, shop for a better rate for the client based on how long they've been on the books. We have guidelines, but in essence, I mean, you can have an agent sell about 20 policies a month, and you can have a top performer in support, sell up to 40 policies a month, and even more depending on the season. So does that range kind of help, 20, 40?
I mean, yeah, that's a huge amount of when you're thinking about the size of our team. We've got 15 agents over there, and they're selling on average 20 policies a month. That's an additional 300 policies that are going on the books, and that varies from the different types of policies. And that's not even taking our sales agents away from getting those new policies, right? Our sales agents do service their clients for a certain period of time, right? Initially when they enroll them, but once they're already on the books and they've been with us for some time, typically it goes over to your team on the customer support side, right?
That's correct. So the original sales agent really focuses on closing, and welcoming, I would say, welcoming our brand new clients, right? Prospects, becoming new clients. So they really focus on that, while we focus more on our existing clients, retaining the clients that we currently have.
Now, there's obviously busier times of year.
Yes.
AEP, annual enrollment period, huge busy time of year. Tell me about your team during that time of year. What is, I think we call them cases, right? What is a case, and how many were our customer support reps dealing with on a daily basis?
So yes, it's definitely our busiest time of the year. We have an all hands on deck approach by that. And what I mean is, we have our regular work hours, but when it comes to AP, we extend that. We ensure that we do what we can on our end to really be available for the clients, starting up even earlier, staying later, whatever we got to do to help the clients out and just be present for them. These agents really take, sometimes we'll have calls in queue up to 60 plus, 80 plus, calls in queue. And it's a nonstop, approach during that time. We also have cases that are created. So the cases could be as simple as they call, they're trying to get a hold of us, they left a voicemail, that voicemail becomes a case. They sent an email out, that becomes a case. They send an email to the agent themselves, the agent receives the email, becomes a case. So these are all inquiries, if it helps a little bit, but it's almost like an inquiry about the client calling in for EIP. So what we do is we get the case, we open the case, we review it. Again, look at it almost as an inquiry. Why does the client need us? What can we do to help them? And then we will contact the client and help them out with their request at that point. For this past AEP that we just got through, it was not hundreds, it was definitely thousands of cases that, we worked on.
Now, a big part of growing an insurance agency or insurance as an individual agent, your own book of business, is keeping people on the books that are already happy. But that takes a lot of time. And so I would imagine during AEP, it's not a big focus on necessarily churning people, rolling them from one plan to another. It's going, actually, did a review and your plan is still the right plan for you. How much of that it goes on? And, I'm guessing that increases our persistency where our clients stay on the books significantly longer. Is that a big portion of what those customer support reps are doing during that time period, is just reassuring clients that their current policy is still the right one for them?
Not just during AEP. This really is something that we do all year long. We have a case that's called Shopping for a Better Rate. Sometimes the client themselves contact us and just want to make sure they're on the best plan. We also do some outreach here and there. Being in this industry, you really have to stay on top of what's going on, what are the changes, what's new. And because we do that, we stay on top of, hey, what are some changes that are going to impact the client, that could possibly impact the client. It allows us to kind of take a proactive approach with the clients and say, okay, we know that with this specific change, it could impact their coverage or their policy. Let's do some outreach. Let's contact the client. Let's ask a couple of fact-finding questions. And let's see if they're still on the best plan. If we can get them to a plan, if they're going to lose coverage, they won't have to worry about that because we're just proactively approaching the client. And now it's almost like I don't have to worry about making that call. They contacted me and I'm good to go. So this kind of happens all year long.
What are some of those key performance indicators, KPIs as everybody refers to them, that you look at? Is it call time? Is it cases? What are some of those things that we look at to make sure that our customer support team is hitting all the different goals that they need besides just sales?
Great question. And we look at a couple of different things. We absolutely do look at call time or the total talk time. How long are we on the phone throughout the day, right? Because that lets us know if we are being efficient and effective with the client. But when it comes to effective, we also look at like our internal replacement closing, our PDP attachment. Are we attaching that PDP when we're talking to the client? Not just focused on, let me sell the core, and then what happens to the PDP, right? So we don't want to impact the client. So we do look at that as well. Obviously, ancillary products is something that we look at. And of course, the CSAT skills, which is really just a survey to ensure that our clients are satisfied with the service that they get from EIP.
What did you call that again?
The CSAT.
What is that?
So it's the customer satisfaction survey. Most companies use that just to kind of get a gauge on if the client is satisfied with the coverage. There's other ones that other companies use, like a net promoter score, but we really do a survey that we send out to a client, and it's just to ensure that they're satisfied with, with the service that they're getting from EIP.
And I'm guessing if we get a low score, that probably creates a case and your team is reaching out, or are they doing those questions themselves? How does that work?
So typically the client gets a survey and then it goes to, they compile we have a department here that kind of compiles the results for us, and then I will kind of get the report. I'll get the insight like, hey, this is where we're at. I will say that we've been doing very well when it comes to contacting clients. If there is a complaint, my team does jump on that. They kind of wear that cap on and ensure whatever it was, whether if it was from a sales perspective or it was someone from support, either way, we take care of that client when there is a complaint. In most cases, if that complaint comes in like via an email, we will turn it into a case because everything has a case. Any type of inquiry from a client will have a case. It may not come in as a case, and that's a perfect example where maybe it's an email that they sent to Jagger, and Jagger will ensure that he gets it to the right department, which is my team, and then the team will review it, we'll turn it into a case, and we'll make customer contact.
Okay. And so I'm guessing that really helps out with persistency.
Yes.
Keeping those people on the books keeps our short-term disenrollments on the Medicare Advantage side extremely low. Is that a major focus? Is persistency and just that first 90 days after the sale, making sure that those clients are happy and truly are on the right plan?
Yes. Anything that comes in, even if the client has already spoken to the sales agent and it's only been a week after and they're antsy about getting their ID cards, if they call in and they request for their sales agent, we'll still take on that role and we'll say, you know what, Ms. Castillo, I'm glad you called in. We're going to take care of that for you, which is one of the benefits of having that licensed agent who's well-rounded, right? They can answer questions about coverages. They can, order the ID cards. And that way the client doesn't have to wait for that callback. Sometimes they're busy. They got appointments. So we want to ensure that right there and then we can take care of the client. So it really helps with that customer experience. And that's always really been our number one focus, the customer experience. So much that during our Monday meetings, we definitely review any reviews that come in. So the team typically gets excited about who gave me a 5-star, right? Because we really work extra hard on ensuring that the customer experience is top notch here.
Very nice. Now, when it's all said and done, what would you say is the most important thing for your team members to be focused on a daily basis when they get on the phones? How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them engaged? Because it's not just a sales thing. It's sometimes you're dealing with people that are unhappy, and maybe it's nothing to do with us. It might be that they couldn't get a referral from their HMO plan, or they had some other thing pop up that they weren't, pleased with. I know that just is something that happens. So how do you keep those people motivated when sometimes they're dealing with the negative side of things?
I'd like to say that in the department, we really focus on fostering a positive and supportive culture, right? So it really helps with the motivational piece. Everyone likes public recognition, so we ensure that we absolutely do that. When we have like those reviews, that we read out to the team, that they know that, hey, they just got this 5-star. The leadership in support really focuses also on leading by example, with their work ethic and whatnot. But as far as motivating and keeping them motivated, we ensure that we have different things throughout the month. It's always a change, right? So it could be as easy to keep them motivated with like music hour. It could be as easy as, just a special spiff for the day. Sometimes it's like theme related. So we just had February, Valentine's Day. What can we do that's Valentine's Day related, but could make it into a spiff to keep the guys motivated out there, right? So it doesn't always have to be big. Sometimes it's also just an appreciation. Obviously, as the director of the department, one of the things that I do daily is look at reports and how did we do yesterday, and what did we complete, and how many more cases do we have to go through the month, what's our backlog. So I look at that stuff, but when I'm looking at that stuff, like I also look at who improved, who's a top performer, who did great. I'm also out on the floor, so I'm able to see and recognize when someone has a tough customer on the phone, when they ask for help, that kind of stuff. So the shout outs for that, and they really enjoy it, right? So it motivates them, because it's not just like, oh, I come, I do my work, and that's it. No, it's I come, I do my work, the team is supportive, the team is available, which is big, right? You want to work in a company where you feel your leadership is available. So those are some of the things that we definitely do throughout the month to keep the team motivated consistently.
With the customer support team obviously being licensed, making sales, going through the entire process, do we have a way for our customer support team members to transition over to sales? Is it kind of a training ground to move into sales?
One of the things I will tell you is, as one of the leaders here, I love when they come into my office and they say, hey, I'm ready. I want to join sales. I want to go into that department. I will be their number one, cheerleader. I will do what I can to see if we can get them an interview so that they can interview. Obviously, whoever goes into the sales department, has to really be focused on closing the sale, closing the leads, right? Because as we know, leads aren't free. They got to be someone who's focused. I don't know that sales is for everyone. I think that they have to have, certain characteristics to be able, and behaviors, right? To be able to be successful in a sales role. And I work pretty closely with the sales leadership team and Jagger himself, where we're able to have a conversation and discussion and say, hey, you know what? I got a couple of people that if we are looking, I see we're hiring, I think they'll be great over there. Why? Because of X, Y, and Z. So we want to make sure that we do right. Just like we want to do right by the client, we also want to do right by the agent. Is it going to be a role where they'll be successful at? And the good thing is that we have a good relationship where we can talk about it offline, and we want to make sure that if they come into support, we pretty much say, hey, it's kind of like a stepping stone into EIP. If you want to get into sales, we'll review it after, X amount of months, and then it could be an opportunity for you to go into sales. And we have done that in the past, and we'll continue to do that. We just want to make sure that we're doing right by the person too.
But it sounds to me like we don't treat our support team as the junior agents that are just now learning. It's actually a role that has a certain personality type that maybe fits better. And a lot of the people on the customer support team don't necessarily want to be on the sales team. Is that true?
Yeah, I think being in a customer support role, you really have to focus on emotional intelligence. That almost has to be like the number one thing that you have, right? Why? Well, because you're focusing on the emotion and being able to resolve and react to the client's situation. So that's one of the number one things that we look for in a support role versus a sales role. Is that, see how there's a difference where you focus more on the client, their experience, their emotion, versus in sales, we're focusing on ensuring that we're giving you the right thing, not based on your emotion, but based on your situation.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's kind of unique. I honestly didn't know much. I didn't know if it was kind of a core pathway in. It sounds like it's an option, but where we don't use our support team as just a training area. They truly are experts in support, and they play a completely separate role. It seems obvious, but in reality, a lot of people, I know I've been, with some different groups, and that is what they do. They say, we're going to get you comfortable on the phone. You're going to be taking our customer support calls, and then we're going to transition into support. But what we have is more of a support team that is dedicated to that mission, that support mission. And yes, sales come with it, but they are kind of chosen for that type of role. It's that they fit into that piece of the puzzle.
They absolutely do. We absolutely look for that. We want to make sure that when we're dealing with, the thing is that we really focus on our existing clients, right? So we want to retain the client. We want to keep the client on the books. We want them to feel that they can pick up the phone, call us, and we'll take care of whatever need they may be. I mean, they could have spent an hour, 2 hours with a sales agent, close the sale, and then 3 months later, they're like, what was the name of that person, right? So, because it happens. But they won't forget the experience that they had in EIP. So they'll pick up the phone, they'll call EIP, and anybody who's in the support department will be able to take care of the client. Why? Because we all kind of have the same method. We all kind of look at ensuring that the customer experience is the number one thing we focus on, the customer's request. Everything else comes second after that, but it comes, right? So it is a benefit to having licensed customer service agents because you're well-rounded. You can focus on a one-call resolution in even in some scenarios. And what I mean by that is I have the client on the phone. I'm already talking to them. And let me scan real quick. Is there gaps here? Do I see that there's gaps? They've been on the books for 3+ years. Well, what happens after 3+ years with the same policy? Your premium goes up, right? So now you're asking those fact-finding questions. Now you're moving into shopping for a better rate. Now you're trying to see and kind of get in front of it. You're being proactive. Let me make sure that the client is happy with what they currently have, with the coverage, with the carrier. Or is it that they've already had so many increases in the past 3 years that let's help them out? Sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no, it really just depends. But if we can help out the client, we will. The other thing is that in the support department, you got to understand that these guys deal with 32, 28 case reasons, as opposed when you're in a sales role, you really focus on, closing the sale. That's really the main thing. These guys focus on questions about coverage, about plans. I need ID cards. I have a gap and I need vision, like that story I mentioned earlier. I need vision. Not understanding a certain policy, shopping for a better rate. So there's so many different scenarios. We want to make sure that they're well-rounded so that they can help any client with any request they have, and sales can continue to do what they do best, which is welcoming those brand new prospects into EIP.
So keeping those clients on the books is helpful to the client because they're not just churning and burning every single year, having to reshop their insurance year in, year out. But when they do need that, you guys are there to help. You have the ability to do that. And so that maintains our book of business, which gives us the ability to hire more people in sales, in customer support, and then continue to grow and continue to help out more people. This past enrollment period, there were a lot of plans that were discontinued on the Medicare Advantage side. And so being proactive when we find out about those things, when those letters start going out and the annual notice of changes letter starts going out, reaching out to those people, making them aware of what those things are. Was that a big piece of this past annual enrollment period, was notifying people? And were there a lot of them that were surprised to hear that didn't know about it?
We definitely did that this past year in September, right before we started our open enrollment. We did do some outreach for some of the carriers where it was going to be impacting the clients. It was a 50-50, right? Some clients were like, oh, yes, I received a letter. But then we also had clients who were like, what letter? We don't know if they tossed it out. We don't know what they did with it. But it did give them an opportunity to say, oh, something's happening. Maybe I do need to open my mail and make sure that I understand what's going on with my coverage. I think that it happens to anyone, right? You get so much mail, junk mail, and it's easy to kind of oversee something. So having that call really helped us out. One, it showed that we were being proactive with them, right? Two, it allowed them to trust us a little bit more because we had the information as far as their coverage, their information, who signed them up, who's their carrier. I mean, we had everything for them. We did all our research before, and now we're calling you with, okay, what are the next steps? Let's get together in a partnership and ensure that you still have coverage at the end of the day. So not a lot of pushback. A lot of people were actually really happy, that we reached out and we were calling them.
Now, one of my last questions that I always do is I covered a bunch of topics that I didn't really give you ahead of time. You had the basic outline of things, but what is something that we didn't talk about today that you don't think gets talked about enough, or, coming from your role as the support manager, director of support, what's something that we didn't get a chance to talk about today that you think other people should be aware of or maybe aren't thinking about?
I would like to say that for the support department, one of the things that allows us to be so hands-on is that they're also underwriters. And I don't know if everyone knows that, right? So what I mean by that is they can pretty much write for any state, for any carrier that EIP has. So if there's ever a situation where someone is not able to finish writing the application for whatever reason, we step in. So not only can they answer all these questions, not only can they also, sell if there's something missing and there's a gap in their coverage, but they can also step in and help any sales licensed agent or that may not have that specific, may not be appointed to that specific state. We'll jump in and we'll ensure at the end of the day, we're going to work in a partnership to ensure that client has the coverage that they need.
So what you're saying is there might be a situation where one of our agents is licensed in this certain state, but maybe they weren't appointed with the company that is the best plan for that client. And so at that point, the sales agent has the ability to move them over to the support team and actually finish that enrollment and actually help that person out in a compliant way.
Yep, that is correct. And sometimes, it's just because, we do have new hire class like any company does, right? And sometimes it's just timing. When you get the balls rolling in the beginning, sometimes there's that little gap, right? But what we do is we prepare for that gap. And what is it? Support can step in and ensure that they can underwrite. If they need to, we'll do it.
Yeah, so contracting paperwork takes time, things along those lines. And, our agents can write all those policies. They're contracting up, but sometimes it's a delay and they're not appointed with a certain carrier yet. And they notice, hey, this person's actually going to be great on a Humana HMO in Florida. I'm licensed in Florida. I can sell in Florida, but my appointment for Humana hasn't come through. And so I need to push them over to our support team, and they have the ability to then enroll them in that proper plan because it's the plan that fits the client's needs the best, not just the plan that's available to the agent. It's actually a client-centric focus.
That's correct.
All right. Well, hey, Monica, we covered a whole bunch of topics today. It was a great time, and I really do appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations like this moving forward.
Have a good one.